As reselling has become way more popular over recent years, I think it's fair to say that there's a pretty distinct split amongst people who deem reselling unethical and then people who say it is perfectly okay. So in today's video, I want to share with you my opinion on both sides of the argument. I want to talk about why I think we should cut resellers some slack, as well as the aspects of reselling that I don't think are very ethical and that I would like to see, disappear into the night. I'm going to be playing a little bit of devil's advocate in this video, and I think you'll see by the end that I am a fairly pro reselling person. However, like I said, there are some aspects that I don't agree with, and we will talk about those soon. So before we get into the actual ethics of these different areas of reselling, I first want to talk about the circular economy and how resellers actually fit within it. So the circular economy is a system that is based on reusing and regenerating. The three main principles of the circular economy are eliminating waste and pollution, circulating products and materials, and regenerating nature. So anybody who shops secondhand is contributing to the circular economy, which is fantastic. And resellers, in my opinion, do play a pretty significant role within the circular economy. I view resellers almost as a second layer of that middleman that we hear, which is, thrift stores, secondhand stores, charity shops. They're just an additional layer to that, which makes secondhand shopping even more accessible to people. Now, reselling has been around for decades and decades and decades. It is not a new thing. Ever since, eBay and Craigslist have been a thing, which came out decades ago, people have been reselling, and even before the digital age, of course. But the reason it's become so popular over recent years is, of course, because of social media. And I also think because of the rise in side hustle culture, people trying to make extra money, and of course, some people working to do reselling full-time as well. So definitely not a new concept, but it is also a very hot topic in today's society. Or I should say in today's thrifting, secondhand culture. Now, I want to talk about what I see as the most common misconceptions about resellers. So when I see people criticizing resellers, it's for a couple of reasons, but the main thing that I see is they are criticizing the prices of the items that they are reselling. Now, to be extremely, extremely clear, I think that outrageous, unjustified markups are wrong. I view that as an unethical side of reselling when you are hiking up the price way too much that seems reasonable and essentially making the item less accessible to the everyday person. And alongside outrageous, unjustified markups, there are other things that I personally deem unethical, which I'm going to be talking about in a few minutes, but I just want to make that clear when it comes to the other stuff I'm going to be mentioning about pricing. Now, of course, resellers aren't going to sell most items at thrift store prices, right? Like the whole point is to make a profit. So when it comes to resellers who maybe buy something for $5 and mark it up to say 25 or 30, which depending on the item, I feel like is okay. There are reasons that justify the price point. I think the whole thing for me that I don't think a lot of people really understand is how much work actually goes into reselling. Like, it is tough. There are so many intricate details of reselling, and time is money. If you are providing a service to somebody or even a product to somebody, you have to take into account the time that you used to source the item or make the item or whatever the case may be. So I do think that resellers are providing a service just as much as they are providing a product. Here's a breakdown of what resellers are actually doing. And this is what I see from the surface level. There's probably much more detail that goes into this. But the first thing that they're doing is, of course, sourcing the item. That takes time to go find the items. That takes, gas money. That takes miles on your car. It totally depends on where you're going and what you're doing, but at the end of the day, it takes time. And of course, the time to actually search through the bins, which a lot of resellers do, or just thrift store racks. Like, these are not, short-term tasks. These are tasks that do take a long time in order to find good quality items. The other thing resellers need to do is market research. So in order to be a successful reseller, you have to know what is currently in demand, or at least what is going to sell or has sold in the past. So this is all about doing research when you're at the thrift store and making sure that the items you're picking up are going to be able to sell online. The other thing that many resellers like to do are repair or restore the item, which of course isn't everybody, but these are things that take time. They take supply, they take expertise and craftsmanship, so we have to keep those things in mind. Now, the next thing is, of course, photographing and listing the items. Now, listen, I have sold things on Mercari and Poshmark and all those third-party reselling platforms, just my own items. I haven't actually done reselling yet. And listing and taking pictures of the items is the worst part, in my opinion. It's just so tedious. It takes so much time. You have to get the best light. You have to, edit out the background if that's something that you're doing. You have to add every single detail to the description. This is for, there are people out there who list things and give you no detail, but I'm somebody I'm going to give you the inseam. I'm going to give you every single measurement that you need. I'm going to give you the fabric content kind of thing. Like, it just requires so much. And in order to be a successful reseller, from what I've heard, you do need a lot of listings. Like, it's a numbers game. So imagine, having to list hundreds of items. It's a lot. And like I said, as somebody who has sold things through these third-party platforms, I understand why it's so tedious. And then, of course, we have to consider shipping. So things like packing the orders, paying for the supplies for the orders. Some people go and buy label makers. Like, there are things that you are investing your own money in to sell these items. And obviously making trips to the post office. That's another thing that costs gas and time and car mileage and everything. And the last thing I want to mention is storage. So of course, depending on, if people are part-time or full-time or however seriously they're taking reselling, there is going to be storage involved, whether that means taking up space within your home, within your closet, or I've seen also some full-time resellers actually rent storage units. So there are other costs and considerations that people need to think about when it comes to reselling. So I do think that generally resellers' pricing does make sense. And I would like to hope that most people are pricing things based on a calculated culmination of their time, their money spent, and, the actual items, supplies, etc. I know that's not the case for everybody, but I, being the optimist that I am, would like to think that that's the case. You are paying for a curated and intentional shopping experience. I think that if that's not something you're looking for and you're not looking to pay those prices and you do have thrift stores accessible to you, then that's the better option. I do think that the accessibility that resellers provide is what people are willing to pay for, because not everybody has access to thrift stores. Not everybody is able to get to a thrift store. Not everybody has time to go thrifting. And if people are willing to pay a higher price for a more curated experience, and it allows them to shop secondhand, I think that's a win. And I think there are so many people out there who are willing to pay a higher price than what they would at the thrift store solely for the ease of access and the curation that is provided with reselling. To be quite honest with you guys, I've only bought a handful of items from Mercari and Depop and places like that. I don't know if the items were being resold by resellers or if they were like me who are just selling things within my closet, but I was willing to pay, a higher price for items that I knew I wasn't going to find in the thrift store, or a specific brand I was looking for, or a specific style. Like, to me, it makes sense. Now, outside of pricing, there are two other arguments that I hear all the time about resellers that I quickly want to talk about. The first thing is that resellers are driving up prices at the thrift store. Now, my logic on this is, have you guys noticed the prices of everything are going up lately? Like, the past few years have been rough when it comes to grocery prices and rent and common goods that we, supply within our households, from cleaning supplies to clothes to whatever, decor, like whatever we're looking for. Prices are going up. I remember I used to shop at this one thrift store in the city that I lived in a few years ago. And I remember going in for, a few years, and the prices of the dresses were always like $6, which felt fair and felt fine. And then I remember I didn't go for a few months, and I went back, and the prices were $13 for a dress. And, this was right around kind of COVID time when the prices of everything were going up, and it was shocking, but not once did I blame the price on resellers. That just doesn't seem logical to me. I think that thrift stores are raising prices because a lot of them are greedy corporations, right? So I think when it comes to this specific argument, there are definitely bigger fish to fry than resellers. Now, the second argument that I hear is that resellers take all the good stuff. And again, personally, I just don't buy this. Thrift stores are getting a constant influx of new items. And I just don't think that resellers are clearing out thrift stores. Like, when was the last time you went to a thrift store and it was empty or, very scarce with clothes? That has never in my life happened to me. So I view the individuals who think that the thrift stores are being picked over as people who maybe just don't go thrifting a ton, and they're not able to see the constant cycle of new items coming in all the time. Now, I don't thrift a ton these days just because I am working on reducing my consumption and just using what I have. But you guys, I have never left a thrift store empty-handed, and I have never gone into a thrift store thinking that things looked scarce. That's just my experience. I know we all have different experiences. I know that some of you will probably disagree with me, and that's totally fine. Like, we are all allowed to have our own opinions, but I just don't personally view these as valid arguments when it comes to reselling, just because there is so much clothes in this world. I think we're okay. Okay, so now I want to talk about when reseller criticism is justified, because there are some aspects to reselling that I view and I'm just like, that's not great. So let's talk about a handful of things that I personally view as unethical practices. The first thing is reselling new fast fashion items. And another word for this is, of course, dropshipping. So this includes the people who are buying things for dirt cheap from Temu, AliExpress, Shein, and then reselling them. And often what I see is people reselling them with the tags cut out, and they are deeming these items as vintage or Y2K or whatever. And it's just like, it's just so obvious when that is simply not true, and that they're just drop shipping or, like I said, reselling these ultra fast fashion items. Listen, I saw a few people when I was doing my research say, okay, but they're still small businesses, like they're still, creating a business or whatever. But the problem with this is demand. I've talked about this a bunch on my channel, but the only way that we can reduce overproduction within the fast fashion industry and the excess of clothing that we have on this world is to reduce demand. Maybe not the only way, but a big way, and something that us as consumers can do, is reduce demand. So the less we're buying from these new fast fashion stores and brands, the less demand is coming through their pipeline and the less items that they will be forced to produce. Huge, large scale concept, of course, but again, the optimist in me is kind of hopeful that if enough people understand the impact of reducing your demand and reducing buying new items, then, hopefully there will be less clothes produced every year, and that will have a ripple effect on everything else. That's all I'm saying. Now, the next thing that I think is completely ridiculous when it comes to resellers is when people are selling luxury items without authentication. This drives me crazy. Especially after working in the fashion industry for so long, I have noticed such a rise in dupe culture, knockoff culture, if that's what you can even call it. Is it a culture? I'm not sure. But the rise in these knockoff goods being sold online, people buying them, people using them, etc. Now listen, I am not pro luxury goods by any means. I don't buy luxury goods. I don't think a lot of brands who sell luxury goods are ethical. However, I don't like seeing people buy fake luxury items that are marked as real and being ripped off. I think that that is so unacceptable. So if you are going to buy a luxury item from a secondhand source online, make sure that it's authenticated. Like, it is not worth buying something that you are not sure is real, especially at the price point that it is likely being priced at. The next thing that I think is wrong and unethical when it comes to resellers is outrageous markups. So I talked about this a little bit before, but if the price is absolutely ridiculous for what the item actually is, that is just wrong. I feel like I've seen people talk about this a lot with items that are supposedly from the early 2000s or even the 2010s from fast fashion items. Like, I know there was that example of, if I'm remembering correctly, someone selling, I want to say Forever 21 shorts on, Depop or something like that for $200. Like, come on, get real. Whatever you bought that for, you could mark it up 100, 200% and still make a profit, obviously. Like, come on. Stop being ridiculous. I also really, really hate when I see items that are only marked down like 10, 15% from their full price. So, if a sweater was originally $200 and someone's selling it for like $160 or something, I'm like, that just doesn't seem right to me. Maybe it's just me. I don't know. I know people would be willing to pay that, but that's not me. The next issue that I would like to see worked on from resellers, which this is probably the largest issue amongst resellers, or the one that applies to most resellers, and that is excessive packaging and transportation emissions. So, of course, reselling online adds this layer of packaging the item as well as shipping the item. And I think that if you can work on one of the two or both of them as a reseller, that's fantastic. So reusing any packaging that you receive within your own mail as a way to recycle and send them to the buyer, I think is fantastic. Or just investing in packaging that is compostable or biodegradable or just recyclable, whatever the case may be. I know it's not necessarily cute and aesthetically pleasing, but it does a lot better than those polymer bags that many people ship in. And the other thing when it comes to transportation emissions, now listen, I understand having, a worldwide audience or at least a national audience is going to help with sales. I don't think that people should, discount the opportunity they have to sell to pretty much everybody. However, I think that adding the option to sell locally is another fantastic idea. I know a lot of people do this on Facebook Marketplace. I'm pretty sure Mercari has a local pickup option. So if you're able to, as a reseller, add that pipeline to your reselling experience, I think that that would be really beneficial and, allow your local community to benefit from your curated experiences. Curated services is what I mean. And the last thing I want to talk about that I think is completely unacceptable, like this is probably the worst one and the thing that I see the most from people online, are aggressive resellers. So I'm talking about the people who are in the thrift stores or at the Goodwill bins or wherever you are, and they are hovering over you. I've heard stories of people taking things out of other people's carts. We've all been at the thrift store and see somebody who has something that we want. You just get over it, okay? And that's me as a consumer, not a reseller, but I was at the thrift store a few days ago. I saw this woman walk by with this beautiful white jacket. It was just gorgeous. It was in her cart, and I was just like, I really, really want that. But then I just got over it because she already had it. Move on. But I just think that if you are going into the thrift store, which is supposed to be a really fun place to treasure hunt, even if you are a reseller, which I know it's your business, but if you're going into the thrift store and you are acting aggressive to other people who are shopping there, not okay. And I hope people call them out because I just think that behavior is unacceptable. Now, I personally haven't experienced that. However, I do have a friend who goes to the Goodwill bins a lot, and she says it's a madhouse in there. People are very pushy and aggressive. And like, I'm not saying that the world has to be, completely calm all the time, but in an environment like that, the best thing to do is to just be kind to the people around you and just accept what is. If you don't get something that you see someone else has, just accept it. You'll find something else. All right, so there you have it. There's my opinion on pro reselling and against reselling, but for the most part, I am very pro reseller. I am somebody who has had a lot of side hustles over the years. I'm always looking for something to do on the side to make a little bit of money. And frankly, I respect the hustle when it is done right. And I know there are a lot of people out there who are doing it right, and I applaud them. And then there are also people out there who are doing it wrong, and I don't applaud them. And frankly, I think that it's just not okay. And I hope people can recognize the signs of those unethical sellers and avoid them. So resellers definitely shouldn't be as villainized as I think they are online, but like I said, there are some improvements for some people. And honestly, I would love to be a reseller one day. I was considering it a few years ago, but I was at a place in my life where I just didn't have the time. And frankly, I'm still at that place. I don't have the time to do it, but maybe one day that would actually be so much fun to, oh wow, that would be a lot of fun. Not anytime soon, but we'll see. In the meantime, leave a kind comment down below. What are your thoughts about reselling? Or if you are a reseller, I would actually love to hear from you. Let me know your thoughts on anything I mentioned in this video, and we can chat about it. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye.